The signal came without warning. It started as a faint hum, barely noticeable, before growing louder, clearer, and more insistent. Satellites, radios, and televisions all across the world were hijacked, broadcasting the same ominous message. It wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't a request for diplomacy. It was a cold, calculated demand for surrender. The voice speaking was devoid of emotion, its tone almost bored, as though it had done this countless times before. We are the Kravik. Submit to our authority, or face complete annihilation. The message repeated, translated into every language known to man, echoing across the globe. There was no introduction, no preamble. The demand was simple, direct, and absolute. Panic set in almost immediately. Governments scrambled to make sense of it. Emergency meetings were called in capitals across the world. Scientists worked furiously to trace the source of the signal, trying to understand who, or what, the Kravik were. Military leaders, who had spent their careers preparing for wars between nations, found themselves faced with an enemy they had no understanding of. The world was thrown into chaos. News outlets fueled the growing terror, plastering screens with doomsday headlines. Experts debated the likelihood of alien invasion, some attempting to reassure the public, others openly speculating on humanity's imminent extinction. Images of terrified citizens stockpiling supplies, evacuating cities, and locking themselves in underground bunkers became the new normal. Martial law was declared in major cities as governments tried, and failed, to maintain order. But beneath the fear, there was something else, a deep sense of helplessness. Humanity had always wondered whether it was alone in the universe, and now, that question had been answered with a terrifying clarity. Not only were we not alone, but the beings out there were more powerful than anything Earth had ever imagined. The Kravik were coming, and they expected Earth to submit without a fight. The arrogance of the Kravik was clear. The message, the tone, the sheer lack of diplomacy, it all indicated a belief in their superiority. They viewed Earth as nothing more than a speck of dust, a primitive world that would fall in line like so many others before it. They gave no room for negotiation, no possibility of peaceful coexistence. The demand was total. Submit or be destroyed. As the hours passed, it became clear that the Kravik had made no effort to disguise their disdain for humanity. They had not even deigned to show themselves, leaving the world to imagine the horrors lurking in space. The signal, on repeat, seemed almost mocking. The global mood shifted quickly from curiosity to outright fear. Governments quietly prepared for the worst, moving their most important leaders into underground shelters. Nations that had been rivals for decades suddenly found themselves on the same side, united by a common enemy. But amid the chaos and fear, there was a growing movement, small at first, but impossible to ignore. A handful of humans, scattered across different parts of the world, refused to accept defeat. They were not military leaders or politicians, they were ordinary people. Engineers, hackers, scientists, people who understood that surrendering wasn't an option. They began to communicate in secret, away from the panicked broadcasts and frightened governments, hatching plans that the rest of the world could not even begin to fathom. These were the people who believed in humanity's resilience, in its ability to adapt and overcome. They saw the Kravik not as an unbeatable force but as an enemy that had underestimated what humans were capable of. It wasn't arrogance or hubris that drove them, it was something deeper. Humanity had faced extinction before, whether from natural disasters or war. This would be no different. They would not bow down to an invader, no matter how advanced or powerful. The Kravik had expected Earth to be afraid. And they were right. Fear spread like wildfire, gripping the hearts of billions. But the Kravik had failed to understand one crucial thing: humans never stop fighting, not when it matters most. And while the world was preparing for the worst, that small group was preparing, too. Not to surrender, but to answer. The Kravik waited for humanity's answer, confident in their superiority. They expected chaos, submission, and panic, but what they received was something far more unsettling: silence. The world didn't collapse in on itself, nor did Earth's leaders come groveling for mercy. Instead, the response was quiet, almost eerie in its calm. Beneath the surface, however, something remarkable was happening. Scientists, military strategists, and the brightest minds from every nation on Earth had gathered in secret. These were not the people plastered on television screens or featured in the panicked headlines. They were the ones who had been preparing for something like this for years. Quietly, methodically, they had planned for a scenario no one else dared imagine. The world had no idea, but Project Prometheus had already begun. Prometheus wasn't a single plan or weapon, it was a culmination of every technological advancement humanity had made in the shadows, discoveries kept secret for fear of how they would be used in the wrong hands. Now, faced with extinction, everything was on the table. Communications were tightly controlled, encrypted to avoid detection by prying alien eyes. The Kravik might have been watching Earth, but they weren't seeing the real preparations unfold. The Kravik, stationed far away in the dark void of space, underestimated humanity from the start. In their arrogance, they viewed Earth as a backwater planet, a relic of a more primitive time. Their commanders spoke of Earth with disdain, mocking the primitive technology they assumed was all humans had at their disposal. They joked about the ease with which they would crush any resistance, comparing it to putting down a minor rebellion on a far-flung colony. To them, Earth's silence only confirmed their superiority. But while the Kravik commanders laughed, humanity was working. Soldiers trained with renewed vigor, their eyes sharper, their movements precise. Engineers worked around the clock, constructing weapons and systems that had never been seen before. In underground bunkers, far from the public's gaze, massive machines were being assembled, designed to deliver devastating blows against the alien invaders. Hackers infiltrated the darkest corners of the internet, creating firewalls and viruses meant to target alien systems. They didn't know what the Kravik tech looked like, but they knew how to adapt, quickly. Around the globe, the once fractured world began to unite in a way it hadn't in decades. Rivalries between nations were set aside as a greater purpose emerged. The air was thick with determination. For once, humanity wasn't fighting itself. They had a singular enemy, and they were preparing to face it together. Warnings continued to come from the Kravik. Their messages became more frequent, more menacing. Each time, they promised extinction if Earth did not comply. They expected fear to mount, expected leaders to crack under the pressure. But still, there was no response from the humans. Just that unnerving silence. The lack of compliance frustrated the Kravik. They were used to lesser species falling in line. Earth's refusal to even acknowledge their demands disturbed them. As the hours crept toward the expected invasion, the Kravik commanders grew restless. They sent scouts, probing Earth's defenses from a distance. But every time, their drones returned with the same information: nothing had changed. Earth's primitive defenses stood as they always had. No new fleet, no advanced space weaponry. It was as if humanity was waiting for the inevitable. But deep underground, in hidden facilities and secret labs, the real war machines were being primed. The humans were preparing to unleash technologies the Kravik couldn't have dreamed of. Project Prometheus was far more than a defense, it was a statement. Earth wasn't going to submit. They were going to fight, and they were going to fight smart. The growing unease within the Kravik fleet was palpable. For all their confidence, something about this silence, this lack of engagement, felt wrong. They were used to chaos, to fear, to cries for mercy. But Earth had responded with nothing, and that nothing was unsettling. On the ground, the mood had shifted. What started as raw fear was morphing into a quiet, steely resolve. People still whispered about the Kravik, still feared the unknown threat lurking in space, but that fear was giving way to something stronger: determination. The world's governments had stopped trying to reassure the public. They no longer needed to. The people understood now: this was their fight. Across the globe, there was a shared understanding, one that transcended borders, politics, and ideologies. For the first time in living memory, humanity stood united in purpose. This was no longer a matter of survival. This was about defiance. This was about standing up to something that thought it could crush them, and proving that humanity wouldn't break. The tension grew with each passing hour. Earth remained silent, but every corner of it was alive with activity. Factories repurposed overnight to churn out weapons, underground labs running simulations on alien tech, armies mobilizing quietly but efficiently. The final pieces of Prometheus were being put into place, and all that was left was for the Kravik to make their move. As the day of the invasion loomed ever closer, the silence from Earth remained. The Kravik, once certain of their easy victory, now faced a creeping sense of doubt. Something was coming, something they hadn't predicted. Humanity wasn't panicking. They weren't submitting. They were simply waiting. And for the first time, the Kravik began to wonder if they had misjudged Earth after all. The sky above Earth darkened as the Kravik fleet descended from the void, their ships enormous and ominous, blocking out the sun. For the first time, humanity glimpsed its invaders, and the world collectively held its breath. News channels went silent, people on every continent stopped what they were doing, their eyes drawn to the horizon, where the alien crafts loomed like harbingers of doom. The fear that had been building for weeks now seemed justified. The Kravik were here. The ground shook as the first alien crafts touched down, their immense weight compressing the earth beneath them. Towering mechs, bristling with advanced weaponry, emerged from the bellies of these ships, and the assault began. Alien soldiers marched with mechanical precision, their movements efficient, cold, and methodical. Cities fell silent as power grids were knocked offline, communications severed in an instant. The Kravik, confident in their supremacy, began leveling everything in their path: government buildings, military outposts, civilian homes. They had done this countless times on other worlds, and Earth, they believed, would be no different. The initial resistance was exactly what the Kravik expected. Earth's first line of defense, jet fighters, tanks, and missiles, was no match for their advanced technology. Kravik mechs swatted down fighter jets with ease, their energy shields deflecting even the most powerful human artillery. Earth's defenses crumbled swiftly, and the invaders surged forward with the arrogance of a species that had never lost. It was a show of force meant to crush any lingering hope, to drive home the futility of resistance. But as the Kravik forces pushed deeper into the heart of Earth's cities, they began to encounter something unexpected. Out of nowhere, hundreds of small, sleek drones darted from hidden silos and underground bunkers, too quick and too numerous for the Kravik to track. These drones were no ordinary machines. They moved with frightening intelligence, anticipating and outmaneuvering the Kravik mechs, coordinating strikes with a precision that rivaled their own. For the first time in their conquests, the Kravik were facing an opponent who could match them tactically. The drones weren't the only surprise. From the depths of the earth, camouflaged bases and hidden cities sprang to life. Engineers, soldiers, and civilians alike had spent weeks preparing for this moment, building makeshift barricades, designing weapons out of whatever they could find, and modifying vehicles for guerrilla warfare. Urban landscapes became a maze of traps, with entire streets rigged to collapse on the invaders. Human soldiers, equipped with adaptive camouflage and exoskeletons designed to enhance their strength, struck from the shadows, disappearing before the Kravik could retaliate. This wasn't a war the Kravik had prepared for. In all their arrogance, they had assumed humanity would fight a conventional battle, bringing their primitive tech to the front lines where it would be easily crushed. They had not accounted for humanity's greatest strength, adaptability. Everywhere the Kravik turned, they were met with resistance. Not the uncoordinated chaos they had expected, but a highly organized, decentralized defense. It wasn't the high-tech weapons that stunned the invaders, it was the ingenuity behind them. AI-controlled drones coordinated with ground forces, setting traps, disabling Kravik tech with electromagnetic pulses, and launching hit-and-run attacks that left the towering alien mechs disoriented. In one instance, a group of human engineers, having reverse-engineered a piece of alien tech weeks before, hacked into a Kravik command network, turning one of their own war machines against them. The massive mech turned its weapons on its alien masters, cutting down Kravik soldiers in a blaze of fire before being destroyed. The Kravik had never experienced a war like this. They were used to overwhelming force, to the raw power of their war machines crushing all beneath them. But Earth fought back differently. There were no large-scale battles, no lines of soldiers waiting to be obliterated. Instead, humans struck from every direction, unpredictable and relentless. Every street, every building, every piece of infrastructure the Kravik thought they had destroyed was repurposed as a weapon. Entire cities had been evacuated, re-engineered to serve as battlegrounds. And still, the world outside Earth saw nothing, no surrender, no communication. Just silence. The Kravik commanders, once so certain of their victory, began to realize the depth of their miscalculation. Earth was not a primitive backwater, its people were not cowering in fear. This was a planet that had evolved under constant threat, of war, of natural disaster, of extinction. Every time humanity had been pushed to the brink, it had survived. And now, faced with an alien invader who believed themselves superior, humanity was doing what it had always done, adapting, resisting, and fighting back. For every mech the Kravik deployed, humans had a countermeasure. For every drone they sent to scan for resistance, humans found a way to scramble its sensors. Every victory the Kravik thought they had won was turned against them. What should have been an easy conquest was rapidly becoming a nightmare. As the invasion raged on, the tide began to turn. Humanity, which had once been on the defensive, was now pushing back. And for the first time in their long history of conquest, the Kravik realized they might not win this war. They had come to Earth expecting submission. What they found was a species that refused to kneel. The invasion, meant to be swift and decisive, had instead become a drawn-out struggle. The Kravik had wanted an easy victory. But Earth had one message for them: they had chosen the wrong planet to invade. The Kravik forces, once so confident in their overwhelming superiority, were now facing a nightmare they hadn't anticipated. Their war machines, towering behemoths of destruction, began to fall one by one. It started with small, seemingly isolated strikes. EMP blasts, designed by human engineers in hidden labs, short-circuited the Kravik's advanced electronics. Alien mechs froze mid-stride, their lights flickering out before collapsing to the ground with a deafening crash. Energy disruptors, aimed with pinpoint precision, rendered the Kravik's shields useless, exposing them to direct fire. Human soldiers, once thought to be outmatched by the alien technology, now fought with newfound confidence. Each Kravik machine that fell bolstered their morale. They had the tools, the strategy, and the will to fight. From rooftops, forests, and underground bunkers, human forces coordinated attacks that were too fast, too unpredictable for the Kravik to counter. Every strike chipped away at the invaders' arrogance, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable. But the true turning point was yet to come. In orbit, the Kravik fleet still held a menacing presence. They hovered above Earth like a dark storm, ready to rain down destruction at a moment's notice. The invaders believed that as long as their fleet remained intact, Earth's defeat was inevitable. They were wrong. Unbeknownst to the Kravik, humanity had one final card to play. Far below the surface, hidden deep within the Earth's crust, a massive railgun array had been constructed in secret, powered by the planet's own magnetic field. This weapon, codenamed Titan, had been humanity's ace in the hole. It had never been tested in battle, its sheer power a closely guarded secret. But now, with the Kravik fleet poised to annihilate what remained of Earth's defenses, the moment had come. Without warning, a blinding streak of light shot up from the surface of the planet. The first shot from the railgun. It struck one of the Kravik's lead ships with such force that the entire vessel was obliterated in seconds, reduced to nothing more than debris spiraling out into the void. The Kravik commanders, caught completely off guard, scrambled to react. But before they could, the railgun fired again. And again. Ship after ship fell. The once invincible Kravik fleet, the source of their overwhelming dominance, was being torn apart by a weapon they hadn't even known existed. Panic spread through the alien ranks. The Kravik, for all their technological superiority, had no answer to this. They had never encountered a species capable of such a devastating counterattack. On the ground, the impact of Earth's retaliation was immediate. With their command network in disarray and the fleet in orbit collapsing, the Krovik's ground forces began to falter. Communication lines were severed, their once coordinated assault falling into disorganized chaos. Human forces, sensing the shift, pressed the attack. The Krovik, in a last-ditch effort, attempted to regroup and mount a final push. Their commanders, desperate to salvage their crumbling invasion, ordered a full-scale assault on the human strongholds. But it was too late. Humanity had gained the upper hand, and they weren't about to let it go. Coordinated strikes from human forces, both military and civilian, overwhelmed the Krovik at every turn. Drones, hacked and repurposed from alien tech, swarmed the invaders. Guerrilla fighters, using knowledge of their own cities and terrain, ambushed Krovik patrols and supply lines. The tide of battle had turned, and there was no stopping it. For the first time, the Krovik commanders realized that they were losing. They had come to Earth expecting to crush a primitive species, but now they were the ones being driven back. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, its ability to adapt, and its sheer refusal to surrender. The once proud invaders, who had believed themselves invincible, were now retreating. The remaining Krovik forces scrambled to evacuate, their mighty warships in ruins and their ground forces decimated. As they fled, they left behind the wreckage of their arrogance, a grim testament to their failure. Humanity, battered and bruised but still standing, had not only survived, they had won. The day they answered the Krovik's demand for submission was the day they proved that no matter the odds, Earth would never bow. The invaders had come for conquest, but they left with nothing except the bitter realization that they had underestimated the wrong species. The Krovik invasion was over. What remained of their once proud fleet had retreated beyond the reach of Earth's weapons, their war machines reduced to scrap littering battle-scarred cities. The alien commanders, who had once boasted of Earth's imminent defeat, now issued a formal declaration of ceasefire. In their message, there was no mention of superiority, no threats of retaliation, just the cold, stunned realization that they had been beaten. They were humbled, their empire's pride shattered, forced to acknowledge a species they had once considered beneath them. Across the planet, the news of the Krovik's retreat spread like wildfire. The celebration was subdued at first, disbelief lingering in the air. People who had prepared for the end of everything now found themselves staring at a future they hadn't dared to hope for. There were losses, cities in ruins, lives torn apart, but Earth had survived. More than that, Earth had won. The human spirit, resilient and unyielding, had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. As the dust settled, the galaxy took notice. For so long, other alien races had watched Earth from afar, many dismissing humanity as a minor player on the galactic stage, barely worth their attention. But now, those same observers spoke in hushed tones of the battle they had just witnessed. The Krovik, an empire known for conquering without effort, had been repelled. And by a species they had considered technologically inferior. It was a shockwave felt far beyond Earth. From distant worlds, diplomats and leaders recalibrated their views of humanity. No longer could they afford to see Earth as a backwater planet filled with primitives. Humanity had not just survived the Krovik, they had fought back with an intelligence, ferocity, and ingenuity that sent ripples through the galactic community. Earth was no longer an afterthought. It had become a force to be reckoned with, a planet whose people were not easily conquered. Caution and respect replaced the former indifference. But with victory came uncertainty. Earth had shown its strength, but now the galaxy's eyes were upon them. Some races would see opportunity in forming alliances with the humans, eager to learn from their defiance. Others, however, would see them as a threat, a species too dangerous to be left unchecked. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, but with that place came challenges they had never faced before. In the quiet aftermath of the battle, the people of Earth began to rebuild. There was a sense of pride in their survival, in their refusal to kneel. But there was also the understanding that this victory was only the beginning. The galaxy now knew what humans were capable of. And as they stared up at the stars, many wondered what would come next. The day the humans answered, they changed the course of their future, and the galaxy would never forget.